What's going on, people? Welcome back to Atypical. Today, we're talking about anxiety. As some of you may know, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So, the theme for this year is anxiety. So, we thought, why not bring the topic to the boys and have like an open discussion and just discuss what our thoughts on it, see what see what everyone thinks about it, see our viewpoints on it, and just go from there. We've been teasing an atypical therapy session for a while now, so it kind of worked out in our favor. But yeah,
Is this
lads,
therapy?
this is
Is this it?
therapy. This is therapy, fam. How are you lot feeling on this fine Sunday evening recording session?
Anxious.
But
So
you the psychologist?
Who, me?
who's
Yeah.
I mean, I did do psychology, but I didn't do good. So,
You did psychology and bio. You should know all this.
It's true, actually.
yeah, I was a
No
good
one
at it,
else.
lads. I was not
Okay.
good at it. Yeah, but yeah. What you lot saying? How's everyone doing?
doing
How
good,
is
man.
everyone feeling?
It's a deep
Peachy,
Sunday
mate.
You
blues.
just good.
Peachy.
Yeah.
I got Sunday blues. I know someone else has Sunday blues. I don't know why you're lying, my son.
Well, peachy, but it's rotten. So
Rotten peach.
yeah.
Oh, God.
Well, why don't we kick it off with a small definition on anxiety, like what
Yes,
actually is
please.
anxiety.
Yeah.
So, have you got one? Do you wanna?
No. I don't. But I'm glad you're doing it. 'cause,
Why don't we?
my
Why don't
question
we go
leads
through
on
our
to definitions.
definitions? Why don't we go through our
Okay, yeah.
definitions of anxiety, and then we can go to like the textbook definition.
Sure, go for it. You go first.
Okay, I'll go first.
got a
Alright.
definition?
Oh, shit. I didn't think that one through. I didn't think that one through.
Wait, I'll go first. I'll go
Um,
first. I'll go
oh,
first
Alright, go
because
on.
I've got like the most bare bones, horrendous definition, so you can all add on to that. Because what I was gonna say is, I often find like there's a lot of overlap between nervousness and anxiety. So, like a really simple layman of term, me describing it would be like nervousness is like, we'll say, mild on the spectrum compared to anxiety, which is mild to severe, if that makes sense. You're
Okay,
kind
cool.
of feeling the same kind of like anxiousness, for lack of a better word. Circular definition going on here. But yeah, I would say like it's a more severe version of nervousness, which is, like I said, very layman's term.
That's fair enough. I can go next.
Yeah,
Oh,
go for it.
by the way, is Jay here for you lot? Quick question.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
is.
Okay, cool. It might just be my screen. Anxiety. I feel like it's as you said, my son, 100%. Like it's something that, like nervousness, which has a range. I find that it could be something really small, like a thought in the back of your head that's just recurring, but then it can also be like debilitating at times, where it's like I can't go about my day and do anything. Um, so yeah, just a feeling of being overwhelmed and being jittery, um, and just constantly overthinking and stuff like that. So yeah, that's probably what I would say on the matter. Who wants to go next?
Go for it, Joe.
Okay. I like what Massam said about nervousness and anxiety. The way I kind of differentiate it is, for me, nervousness is it's like a specific case of anxiety. So for me, like I'll feel nervous to do with a specific thing that I know is occurring maybe soon in my life. Like I'm nervous for this exam, or I'm nervous for this thing I need to do. Whereas anxiety is more like a state of being where you can't necessarily define a certain thing that draws you to it. It's just like something in the future is causing me to feel anxious. Whereas nervousness for me is like a very specific action that I know is going to happen, that I am nervous for doing that thing in X amount of time.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually thinking about this a little bit earlier about like nervousness and how it feeds into anxiety, and I feel like nervousness is usually about a particular thing, particular event, a particular thing you have to undertake, and then once it's done, the nervousness dissipates. It disappears because the thing you were nervous about is behind you now, like a speech, presentation, something like that. And I think with a lot of stuff, like even like let's say like depression or something, it's like an elongated version of its predecessor in a way. So like sadness, it's fine. But eventually, when you're sad for a long time, it becomes depression, and then it starts to affect your daily activities, right? It's the same thing, I think, with anxiety. I think stress, overthinking, heightened extreme nervousness, once these things start to become sort of commonplace in your life and in your mental state, and your everyday life gets affected because of it, I think that's kind of where anxiety sort of sets in, because you can still feel anxious
Mm.
but not have anxiety, right? So that's kind of what I think about it. Like, being anxious is kind of, it's good, right? It heightens your senses. It can be fight or flight. Like, it can spur you, can keep you alert, stuff like that. But then anxiety, yeah, it's kind of when it affects your day to day and everything like that. And I think, as we've seen, like, it comes in a bunch of different forms, which I'm sure we'll pass over, like PTSD, social anxiety, OCD. The list goes on and on. There's a lot of different types, so there's a lot of different triggers as well. So yeah.
Well, that's actually a good point that you brought that up in terms of triggers. What is, in your experience, something that's triggered you? What can be something in your life that triggers you to have anxiety? Like, I can go first if you want. I'll just go straight into it. Like, it'll be the most minorest of things sometimes. Like, I'll be like on the train, and in my head, if I'm having like an anxious day, for example, I don't know if I have anxiety, but I definitely have very heightened anxious moments where I'm like, oh, if I'm having like an anxious day, and as I said, like I'm on the train or something, I'll have like a moment where I'm like, is everyone looking at me? Or I'm walking past a bunch of people, I'm like, are they looking at me? Are they like, what are they thinking? Why are they thinking that? But then I realize everyone's just in their own bubbles, and everyone's probably thinking the same thing to an extent.
Sometimes they are thinking about you though.
I mean, I know you are.
Oh, don't make me anxious.
what what would you say like a trigger for you could be in your lives?
I would say like things that you tend to care about a lot. Like, for example, I'll tell you what a sort of often trigger is like work related. Certain situations where there's a lot of pressure. So naturally you tend to be, like anxious about the situation because you care about the consequences. So I'd definitely say majority comes through work environment. I feel like that's reciprocated with most people because it's a high pressure situation where everyone can relate to that high pressure situation, right? I'd say that definitely off the top of my head.
That's fair enough. Yeah, that's fair.
This gonna be sound really weird, but even just talking about anxiety now, like, if for some reason it's filling with me with anxiety.
Word,
I don't
bro.
know why.
Word,
I
I'm
got this little
sweating.
feeling in the pit of my stomach. I don't know why. It's just really weird. I'm inducing it upon myself.
It's therapy, lads. Let's do it. We gotta get through this.
For me, I feel like I've only really experienced like proper, like, hardcore anxiety like once in my life. I can't lie. Nothing else really comes to mind. Other like nervousness comes to mind, and just being a little bit anxious, sure, but like actual like anxiety, like in a moment. I guess I know we just said that anxiety is usually something which is a bit elongated over time and stuff like that, but just like one instance, and it was a social instance, right? It was when I was starting my masters, and don't know why, new uni. It was very different. A lot of people are a lot more mature. I came straight from my undergrad. I was 21, right? Started masters straight away, and everyone else is like 25, 26, 27, the age that we are now and we're getting into now, right? And there was like an induction thing, and I went into it, and like genuinely everyone just like separated by like ethnic groups, and like genuinely like, the white people there was the black people there was like two people who were like East Asian, and I was just there, just like by myself on one table. I walked in and I'm like,
no.
where do I sit here? Like, I don't fit anywhere here, right? So like I sat down, I felt hella anxious, right? And I dead ass just faked a phone call and walked out.
Did you say this was at uni?
Masters. Like, it was like an induction, like a couple of weeks before it started. You come into your paperwork, shit like that. And I legit, like, I walked in, I saw that, I was like sweating, bro. I was sweating,
100.
and I just like, I wouldn't say it was a panic attack, but it was the closest I've probably ever felt to one. It was very, very weird. I just couldn't handle it. I just got up and I just
Got out.
just beelined out of that room. And I just took in that fresh air and I was like, holy shit, what was that? Because
Love it.
that never happened to me before. You get nervous for presentations and things like that, but it's different because this was another thing I was reading. Like, nervousness doesn't stop you from doing what you're actually going to do, but anxiety does, and that's kind of like a distinctive factor between the two.
100%.
So like, in terms, but I think nowadays, like, actually since that event, which was probably 4.5 years ago now, I haven't, like, genuinely, anxiety is just not a thing. Because like, when I went through that and I was like on the bus on the way back, I was like, in my head, like, genuinely, I was just like, never again. That's not gonna happen. Like, I'm not over my dead body. That's not happening again. Because for me, like, it's mental health, right? So it's all in your head, right? And I think we can talk a little bit more about people who have like PTSD, and for them it's not, so to speak, right? But generally speaking, it's in your head. You control it, right? So for me, I was just like, never again. Like, I just, in that moment, I just drew a line in the sand. I was like, never ever am I getting that feeling again. And I haven't. And now I'm a lot more comfortable. I still get nervous. I went backpacking. I was solo, bunch of random people who drink and do stuff like that, which I don't do. And it's a very different environment, an uncomfortable environment. But I still didn't allow it to feel like, I just found a way. I found a way in, and then I was just calm. So yeah, I don't really experience it now anymore since that moment, because I was like, F this, not doing that again.
So what was it then exactly? Is it the social environment, like the new nature of that social environment, or the pressure to be like, I don't really fit in anywhere?
It was just a new experience, new things, surrounded by people who are different demographic, in the sense of like, they were older than me. So you feel a bit like, not immature, but you feel like you're an unexperienced person in an experienced environment, sort of thing. You know what I mean? You're like, oh, they've been here, they've done this before. I didn't. Walking in and everyone's, it's like South Africa and apartheid or something's going on. Do you know what I mean? Like, you got one certain color over here, certain color over there. I'm just like, what's going on, bro? This is 2021. Like, what the, 2019, whatever it was. I was like, what is this? And then I was just like, yeah, it was just a lot of factors, I think. And it just bubbled, and I was like, shit. I just like beelined out there, man. Yeah.
So when you said that was induction, right?
Yeah.
So when you put yourself back into that situation, the next time you actually had to go to class,
yeah,
and there was very similar, groupings and segregation of people, then what did you like? How did you feel?
It's fine. Yeah, so literally maybe a week or two later, I actually started. And obviously, first days again, basically like inductions, but you're actually with your lecturers and your other classmates and the other people that were there. And because I drew that line in the sand the day that thing happened. I was like, genuinely, I was like, F this, not happening again. When I went there, I was like, if you were watching me as like a little spirit above my head and you saw me on that day, you'd be like, what the hell? That's a complete 180. Because when I went into that, the second day, 2 weeks later, I walked in there. Hey, mate, how you doing? Nice to meet you. Yeah, my name's Hamza. Where you from? Oh, you're from the US. Cool. Where about? I was banging out conversation like this was my 100th time doing it. And that's something I realized, like, since then, is like, I get nervous for stuff. And I eliminate as much of that nervousness as possible through preparation. Because like, if I'm prepared, then I can't fail. So what is it to be anxious about? Because I've covered all bases, right? And even if I fail, I did my best. But once I've done it just once, when I go for it the second time, I will feel as if I've done it a million times. So there's just no pressure for me. It just disappears. Doesn't mean I'll perform like I've done it a million times, but I'll feel like I've done it a million times.
That's really
So
interesting. The prep thing, because that's something with you that's such a big factor of your personality. Like, you like to prep and be organized for a lot of things. So do you think that's something that stems from, as you said, like being worried of the unknown, like what could happen? So it's like, we've got to make sure
I don't want to be caught unaware. Like,
Got you.
if I cover all bases, then I'll be the best at this, and then I can't be beat at it, kind of thing. So it's like, I know I'll bang it out.
You have a
It's
very
like, I guess, it's confidence.
Yeah. I hear that. You have a very, like, that's a good way to think about it. Like, it's a very fight or flight response, but you're constantly fighting it, like you're on it. So it's really cool. That's it's actually interesting, because it's actually interesting that you said that there's a difference between when you're able to do something and be nervous with it and you're still able to do it, but then anxiety is when it stops you from doing something. Like, I read a fact online that said like a quarter of adults said that they felt so anxious that it stopped them from doing something some or all of the time on this website that I found. So it's just crazy how an emotion or like a thing can stop you. It debilitates you completely from going out and carrying on with life. Do you guys? What about you guys? What about you, my son? What about you, Jay? When was like a time in your lives that you felt like, shit, this is a moment? Have you? Does any moment stand out to you in your life where it's like, shit, like I don't know what to do?
I don't think there's, by that definition of anxiety of like, you just won't be able to approach it. I don't think I've ever been in that situation, to be honest with you, because moments where I felt anxious about something or nervous, different, similar but different to Hamza. I'll give an example, like a classic school presentation, right? Absolutely bollocking it, or a drama performance. But like any time it starts, and I'd say about 5 seconds in, perfectly fine. Like as soon as that 5 second, 10 second barrier is gone, doesn't matter the situation, how I was feeling prior, I'm like in the middle of it and I'm completely fine. So those are all forced environments. So I can't think of one per se where I've been like, I've had the opportunity to be like pull out and I've exercised it, to be honest with you.
Do you think maybe, and this question goes all the way around, do you think when you feel like some experience like that is going to happen, you run away from it so that it doesn't occur? So like you kind of defense mechanism, like you don't put yourself in that situation because you think you have a feeling that you might, like the anxiety will cripple you essentially.
That's a good question. Let me think about that.
That's a good question.
That is a good question. I can
For
answer.
me,
Okay, go. Sorry go for Jay.
I was just gonna say, for me, anxiety it's more related to success and outcome than it is to the thing itself. So like I will feel the most anxious when either either something is done and I'm waiting for an outcome and I don't know what that outcome is going to be, or I know I have to do something in X amount of time and I'm anxious of the responsibility I have for that said event, and I need to prep myself for that event so that something bad doesn't happen to either me or people I'm with or whatever X factors are arranged there. So, I mean, give an example like what my son's talking about, when like stuff to do with work. Obviously, we all have big responsibilities at work. We have exams, we have presentations, stuff like that. It's very easy for people to get anxious in those scenarios because you're anxious of what happens if something goes badly or what if the presentation is bad. So that's like outcome based. There's also instances where I'll give a really basic example. Felt anxious fairly recently when I was driving my car and suddenly my normal route home was closed off. And so I had to follow a bunch of diversion signs to figure out how to get home. Now, that is something unexpected and not really in my control. So I was forced into a situation where I had no relative bearings of how to like go about doing that, fixing that problem. So it's just kind of like on the feet problem solving, and that causes a lot of anxiety because you're trying to solve a problem, also like trying to figure out where you are, abide by the laws when you're driving, not crash, all that type of stuff, and then like try and figure out how to actually get home with a bunch of signs that occur every mile. Like you have no idea really where you're going, right? So that's like a really simple example where you're put into a situation that you don't really have a lot of control over, and it could be a bad outcome. So it's things like that really that get to me sometimes.
That's interesting. Like the fear of the unknown. Like what am I meant to do? Like you're put in that position and you have to quickly think of an outcome. Yeah,
I think that kind of reflects on your personality a little bit, in the sense of like, I feel like you're a guy who likes to take his time and figure shit out and go about it accordingly than just like jump straight in. So that kind of, that's very, it kind of makes sense. Kind of makes sense.
And we're learning a lot about each other, man.
More of this episode then. 10 years.
10 years of friendship.
Probably more than that.
Nuts.
Speak
Way
for
more than
yourself,
that,
guys,
actually.
bro. Speak for you. So you guys are bad friends, bro. I'm not learning nothing new yet.
Wrong podcast.
Hamza likes planning. Jay doesn't like change. Tell me something different.
That's
Oh,
have you
God.
thought of an answer to Hamza's question? Have you got anything?
Honestly, no. Maybe avoiding like social situations, I guess.
Yeah.
But like that's the only one I can think of impromptu. To be honest with you, I don't think I've actually ever. I don't know. I don't know if I've actually ever suffered anxiety or just extreme pressure nervousness. I
Okay.
really don't know where the fine line is. The only times I can think of like where my nerves going crazy and I cannot control it,
Mm-hmm.
recent memory, is like exam results or something. For example,
Okay.
right? The looking, open up the envelope, checking the app. Like those are the only cases that come to mind where I'm like, this is unbearable. I don't
Mm.
know I can do this, and I'll put it off, put it off, put it off.
You know, one thing, a very common theme here. Obviously, I got some quotes for the session because that's just what I do, right? I like my quotes. Um, everything that we've like talked about thus far hits like these quotes like bang on, but right, bang on the nail. And so I got one. I got a few. I'll try and keep it brief, but I got one from Aurelius, right, my guy, who says, "Today I escaped anxiety, or no, I discarded it because it was within me, in my own perceptions, not outside." So everything that we've talked about thus far, we're all talking about problems which aren't in our control, right? And that is like a determining factor of anxiety, it seems, right? And then I've got a couple of other ones which talk about the same thing, which say we suffer more in imagination than reality. The only way, there is only one way to happiness, and that is to cease worrying about things which are beyond the power of our will. So like all of these Greek Stoic philosophers, right, great people of the past, Seneca, Aurelius, Plato, so on and so forth, they talk about anxiousness, right, because it's clearly a thing that's been around since the dawn of time, but they all talk about it in a sense of it's something that's out of your control, that's causing you the anxiety. And so the one more which I'll say for now, whereas when I see an anxious person, I ask myself, what do they want? For if a person wasn't wanting something outside of their own control, why would they be stricken by anxiety? So they all just hit that on the head, and these are some of the greatest, people who have ever lived and who have had big responsibilities, emperors of the largest empires ever. So if someone's going to be anxious, it's going to be them, right? And Aurelius has talked about like how he doesn't want to roll out of bed on a Sunday because he wants to stay in the warmth of his covers, but he realizes he has a job for humanity and things like this. Like this is someone who's you know shares all the emotions that you wouldn't think a leader has, but they have. But what makes them, I guess, better, bigger, stronger, whatever you want to call it, is their ability to shove those down and be like, not today, right? So that's just an interesting thing that I saw so far.
That is very cool. Yeah.
Yeah, that quote about that last one about what does he want or something.
Yeah,
That's a really good one. That one definitely resonates 100%.
The human condition, eh?
The human condition.
Absolutely beautiful.
Psychologist.
Don't do that with my C in psycho for a second.
Oh my god.
It's a pass.
A pass, I'll take it.
Oh, God.
I wanted to ask you guys, do you feel like well, actually no, let me we talked about things that are in control and out of control and what the effect it has on the body and the mind. But what kind of symptoms do you personally experience if you were to have an anxious moment? Or what is something that you, when you're triggered by it, what is something that you express and you show where it's like, okay, cool, I've noticed now that I'm anxious? How can you tell?
Like it's quite literally the heart and mouth moment. Like the stomach drops. All of a sudden it feels weird in the tummy. And then it
Need a
goes
shit.
from there.
The gut, in it, gut
No.
feeling.
The gut feeling, it just drops. It feels like you're on stealth all over again.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
A feeling of like elevated heart rate right in your gut. It's so weird. Like gut feeling is clearly a thing for a reason. It's just like something's just churning in there, right? It feels like it's sickening. It's
Donica, man.
nauseating. Genuinely, it's nauseating. It's nauseating. And a bit of like lightheadedness
Yeah.
in a way.
100%.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
the mind is like it's
So
so
powerful.
powerful, man. It's so
Mad.
powerful. It's so powerful.
What about you, Jay? You got anything?
Interesting. I usually get two, I guess you could call them symptoms. Is it a symptom or flags of anxiety? One is I tend to almost completely lose my appetite. I just don't feel like eating. And the second thing is I usually have to put all my focus into the thing I'm anxious about to work on it to not feel anxious anymore. So, an example like final year of uni, if I was anxious about a certain assignment and I was like, this is stressing me out, then I would just spend the whole night doing that assignment so that I can make some ground onto it, and then I'd feel less anxious because I'm in control of it.
We know.
Well, yeah.
So like with that, then I come back to like the concept of fight or flight. What you've described there is fight, right? A lot of people, now it depends on the reason and the event of which you're anxious about. Massive spectrum of, you know, there's things like exams and then there's things like life and death, right? But like is running away, whether it's for a short period or entirely, ever a good idea?
That's a good question.
I thought you were going down that avenue.
I think it depends on the situation. If you're about to be mauled by a fucking bear,
That's not anxiety. That's a different.
That's your instinct, bro.
That's different, bro.
Yeah.
it's fight or flight, bro. It's fight or flight.
That's true. That's true.
I mean, I think it's almost instinctive. Like even fight or flight is a human instinct, right? So it really depends on how you as a person are wired. I'm sure you can probably train both feelings, both actions more. But yeah, I would say depending on the situation. Like sometimes if the situation isn't worth putting more of yourself into it and you probably benefit from just leaving and exiting out of it, it might be more beneficial than actually being confrontational and being all right, cool. But I guess it really depends on the situation. Even in fights, for example, there's increased adrenaline. Your fight or flight response automatically activates, but you need to know when you're fighting or when you're leaving. You know what I'm saying? Because some fights there's no point.
Pick your battles.
Pick your battles. John Jones ain't gonna fight Adesanya, is he?
John Jones is
It's
going to
too
be
easy.
Tyson Fury.
It's too easy for him. It's the other way around. But yeah,
I don't know, but I think I feel like the reason why you're bringing it up is because let the psychologists like try and make a little
psychological
psychoanalysis.
analysis, yeah.
Yeah, a little psychoanalysis. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I feel like
boom, bro.
I feel like maybe do you feel like it's almost always beneficial to fight because it's the fact that you've conquered the moment and now it's like, okay, cool, I fought, I came, I sort of conquered, fam. You know what I'm saying? Like
Or
you've
you
done it.
lost and died.
All that. When you got mauled by the bear.
Blazing.
Guns blazing.
Yeah.
What?
It's not even the end of it.
Guns blazing was
He's
not the
anxious,
phrase I
lad.
was
Come
gonna
on.
use.
It's alright,
No,
bro.
no, guns blazing was not the phrase I was going to use. But we'll roll with it. Yeah.
For me personally, I just don't want to lose. I'm too competitive, man. Like even to myself, like, I'm being genuine. Like even to myself, like I just don't want to lose.
Mhm.
I mean, I do lose loads of times, plenty of times, but not without a fight. I just can't. My brain's just not wired like that. I just can't. I refuse. I don't know how else to say it. I refuse. It's just not gonna happen.
It's
at all,
definitely
ever. I don't care.
it's definitely a man thing because men are just wired to not I'm not even trying to be like sexist or anything. It's just men are wired to fight
Psychologist,
and
innit?
find the problem.
Theory.
It's all based on theory, bro. You're not wrong. None of that shit's proven, man. Fucking
When's the
chaos.
last
Evolutionary.
When's the last time a
evolutionary.
psychologist said, "I'm not trying to be sexist"?
Probably quite often.
True.
But
But
that
it's
is a good
just-
sitcom.
It's a man's. it's a man's natural reaction to try and find a solution or try and
It's
fight the
true.
moment,
It's
because
true.
it's
Because that's
like,
what we had to do, hunter gatherers, blah blah
What,
blah, etc.
what,
yeah,
etc.
what
it's
do we
almost
think
toxic
of?
sometimes. We put a lot of pressure on ourselves in that sense.
On
Like,
yeah, for
yeah.
sure,
Yeah, for sure.
toxic,
For sure.
Sorry.
We take on
toxicity.
battles that we just do you know what I mean? Pick your battle sort of thing, innit? There's some
Mhm.
things you just don't need to walk away. It's out of your control, right? Like we just talked about.
I
100%.
definitely think there are instances where it's good to not fight. Like, well, not necessarily. Yeah, maybe good, or maybe just at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. So why are you trying to fight something that you don't really actually care about?
Can you give an example? Because I have an example of what we're kind of been referring to, of the idea of running away from something, from a person I know, because I know he was severely anxious about the situation, and his situation was, I know I'm giving a lot of exam metaphors, but roll with it. So he kind of was very anxious about the exam situation, and his reaction between fight and flight was flight. He just thought that there's no point putting the preparation, which is contrary to another person here. And just because he didn't think it was a good, I think he was too anxious about the idea of preparing that prevented him from doing it, crippled him, which I know because he told me.
Mm.
So obviously that's not a positive thing to do, because I do agree with you, with Jay. I think
yeah.
with Jay, when Jay was talking about the coursework, it's literally the same way I felt. But what do you think about situations like that?
I think at some point in everyone's life they will be crippled, whether they like it or not, by choice or by force. There's something like genuinely
Not
something's
physically,
gonna
yeah.
happen in your
Not
life.
physically.
No,
Bye.
no.
Just-
But like,
Sometimes you go on the smiler and you're crippled.
jeez Louise. But like, there is going to be an event that occurs in your life that will cripple you. It could be anything. It could be the dumbest thing ever, just growing up in high school, or it could be something super serious when you're a father and you got a family, or you got work and you got a serious. It could be anything, but just in that moment, wherever you are mentally, it will cripple you, and it's, I think, up to you how you then move forward from that point, whether you
Exactly,
allow
yeah.
it to continually cripple you, or whether you realize that it's not a good idea to be crippled, because reality is, yeah, sometimes you don't have to fight, sometimes not necessary, but if something's crippling you, then it probably was something you should have fought against, right? Otherwise it wouldn't have, we wouldn't say it's crippling you. We say that because it had a negative effect, right? So yeah, I don't know, that's kind of my take on it.
This is interesting because it's almost like a test. It's what dog are you feeding today? Are you going to be the guy that fights the situation, or are you going to be the guy that leaves it? But how would you, Hamza, as someone that's a strong advocate for fighting the situation and making sure that you get through it one way or another, and if not, learning from your loss, how would you um what kind of advice would you give to someone who's in a stressful situation? What do you do to get over it yourself?
It's all unlicensed advice. We are not liable for anything that may occur.
Harshu is.
Because of the
Harshu is-
advice that we've given. Harshu is
Harshu is a
clinical psychologist.
With my A levels.
So
One A level, bro.
He's got a mastery in bullshit.
it's an art, bro. It's an art or a
Yeah,
science.
it's
I don't
true,
know.
it's true.
My advice for dealing, like, how would I deal with stressful situation? I like to, and I've spoken about this before. Do check out the mental health episode that we did a little while back. I'm a big proponent of first principles thinking, of breaking things down into fundamental components to see what I can control and I can't control. And reading a lot of Stoicism has helped me, like of those I just mentioned, has really helped me in that regard. Because if at the end of the day, I'm doing everything I can about the things I have in my control, that I just don't have to worry. And also comes from a religious perspective. Being a Muslim, I think if there's other Muslims out there that are listening to this, you will actually, to be honest, any religion actually, any religion that has that same sort of relative structure to it, of like, there's an Arabic word tawakkul, which means faith, right? Like, just trust in God, right? And God's plan. And God is the best of planners, right? So for me personally, a lot of my ability to deal with any problem in life, anxiety or other, derives from religion, right? That's my foundation first and foremost. That's where my mind goes immediately, and then it goes into like first principles thing. Then it goes into breaking it down. It's like, okay, what can I actually do, right? And there's an Arab proverb which originates from a saying of our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, which, if you say to me like, what's the one thing you live your life by, I would say it's this, and it's that: pray to God, but don't forget to tie your camel. Which basically means that yes, your camel is there in the night. You're a Bedouin. You're gonna go, back to your hut, where your house, or wherever it is. You got your camel. That's your lifeline. That's the caravan of the desert. You lose your camel, you're dead, right? Yes, pray to God to keep it safe, but at least do your bit by tying it up and making sure it's safe. You're doing your half, then leave the other half to God. So that's like me. That's how I live my own life, and so and there's a couple of other quotes from the Quran, which say, God doesn't burden a soul beyond what it can handle, beyond what it can bear. So that whatever tests, trials, tribulations you're given, you can handle it. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been given it in the first place, right? And that, with every difficulty, there's relief on the other side of it. So again, in our religion, you don't suffer through anything except that it's an expiation of your sins, not even a pinprick to your finger of suffering without it benefiting you in some way, shape, or form, like forgiveness for your sins, giving you ease, and to patiently endure it. That's something that's very frequent in the Quran, is that no matter what issues, trials, tribulations you come across, just patiently endure it. For God is with those who are patient. Be patient in this world, and God will provide you with abundance beyond your belief in the hereafter. So yeah, that's just like that's my own mind state. And I think
I like that.
that I said in regard to my religion, I think will be true for a lot of Muslims.
I like that. So faith and religion really helps you, and
With
that's something
everything.
you would. Yeah, I
With
understand.
everything.
I hear that. What about you guys? What's
Yeah,
something that helps you?
100%. The situations where I can't control, like Hamza's reference of like keeping the camel alive, don't actually ultimately have control on that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those situations, 100%, I feel it's very cathartic and relieves me to pray 100% in those situations. So, like, for example, I'm using the exam metaphor again, guys, I'm sorry. But like, I can only do so much preparation or revision and I can do it. But then in the period from exams, post exams, I'm praying daily, for
Mm.
example, in that situation. So yeah, I never like to worry myself too much about things I can't control and stuff that's too in the far future,
Mm-hmm.
because God's always got a plan, Allah's always got a plan, sort of thing. So yeah, I kind of feel like, but that's me personally. Actually, it's kind of hard to tell other people don't overthink about unforeseeable future,
Yeah.
because some people are overthinkers and they
There's a lot of genetics that play a part. Your DNA, your
really.
background. Yeah, for sure. I think if you look at your own family and your own family trees, your cousins, your aunties, your uncles, especially coming from South Asian community,
We'll get
it's
onto that.
ridden. Yeah, we'll get onto that. It's ridden, and I think it's being in that environment growing up, right? That's I guess kind of a non-genetic way of looking at it. It will these things will soak into you, right? And if you're
Mm-hmm.
surrounded by a bunch of anxious people who overthink, you're going to grow up being like that until hopefully one day you can snap out of it. But I also
Is
think
that
genetically,
genetics
man.
though?
No, that's not that's what I'm saying. It's like just being surrounded in an environment. But I ain't checked the science for it, right? But I generally do think
Uh
It's
oh.
not a
I
good
I
start.
just
Uh
yeah, it's
oh.
a great start. No, I'm just covering myself, right? Like the Harshu's not doing it, but I'm doing it for myself. But I know I do think I just do feel like certain dispositions when it comes to your way of thinking and your mental state, and um if
Yeah.
people in your past, like in other generations, have a history of depression and
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
like that, that is genetic. That's a
Yeah. Yeah.
fact
Yeah.
that I know for a fact, right? You're more likely and more susceptible to pick up on those mental health disorders, and typically they tend to be quite extreme. Those who have that stuff sort of passed down genetically, you're a lot easier
Mm-hmm.
to pick it up, a lot easier to feel susceptible to it. So yeah, I do think it's both genetic and your environment. I think both factors play an
You can. Yeah.
incredibly important amount.
I had
But
a
it's easier to get out of one than the other.
100%. 100%. It's always easier. I actually did a mental health, not mental. I had a full body MOT the other day, and one of the questions they asked me, it basically tells you like top to
what's that?
bottom, top to bottom,
What?
like how your body, your mind, and like how you're functioning essentially. Like
How? Like, what is it like a? How
it's a
does that
health check.
occur?
It's a health check. It's I got it as a benefit via work, so I was like, I
Who
signed up to it.
undertakes it? Is it like a
It's a
what
doctor
sort
and
of
a practitioner.
professional? Okay,
It's
right.
yeah,
Clinical, like psychological practitioner.
yeah. So it will be
Right.
a I went to a Nuffield healthcare
Okay,
center,
okay, okay.
and they sat me down an hour with each
That's kind of
person,
sick, you know.
and they asked in one of them one of the questions was is do you have a family history of depression or anxiety and stuff like that. So I definitely do agree with it being something that can be passed down. But yeah, no. Jay, did you have anything you wanted to say on how you would help? What's something that you would say to someone that is suffering from anxiety or
I'm Hamza's gonna say, "Oh, this is Jay talking about it again." I I personally, like, I very much agree with what Hamza said of breaking things down to fundamentals, and what everyone's basically been saying about trying to alleviate yourself from the responsibility of things that are out of your control. At the same time, what has always helped me, and pretty much what I do all the time anyway, is I very fundamentally just take things day by day.
Hmm.
Like, if I know this thing is stressing me the hell out, well, there's only so much I can do right now, so I'll just do that. And then tomorrow's a new day. There'll be new factors that come into play. There may be something really good happens that helps me, maybe something really bad that makes things worse, but there's no point me worrying about that or getting happy about that because it hasn't arrived yet. So I'll do what I can today, figure out tomorrow, and then hopefully get to the goal and do as much as I can in my control to reach that goal.
I hear you. That's cool, yeah. Um for me it's I'll say my thing as well, and then we can round it off on that section of it. But I feel like, yeah, agreed in terms of like if things are out of my control, I can't do anything about it. There's no point in stressing about it until it's in front of me. Um but I do, like I've mentioned this before, and we did it as part of the sleep bite as well, but the whole meditation thing really does help. I'm not the biggest religious man when it comes to Hinduism. I'm Hindu by birth, but I'm not I'm not like extremely religious or anything, but there are some teachings within the religion itself on just how to live your life in terms of um meditation, being one with the mind and stuff like that. But then, so kind of ties in with what you guys said about having faith and religion as something that helps. I'm not that personally, it's not that too much of a thing, but the religion, the meditation bit is something that I've taken into my life, and it's really helped me in a sense that it kind of helps me focus on myself, my mind, my breathing, and then it makes me realize that things will happen around me. Like someone said, your thoughts, and you, when you're overthinking, it's like you sitting on the side of a road and cars are going by, and you're watching cars go by, and each car is a thought. But what you're meant to do is just let the car go by, like you see the thought pass by in front of you, rather than gravitate towards one of those cars or thoughts and focus too much on it. So that's a big part of meditation, is just letting things happen around you and focus on your breathing and bring yourself back to your core, which really helps me. But yeah,
I think
that's
religiously, it's humble. It humbles you as well. When you prostrate, you're putting your forehead on the ground. It's very humbling, and it grounds you, for lack of a better word. A bit punny there. It grounds
yeah.
you. Genuinely, it does. So yeah, it's almost like God knew what he's talking about when he said you should probably meditate, aka pray. It's almost like he's all knowing.
It's got a reason. There's a reason.
Yeah, it's just funny, it's funny.
Yeah.
But like how talking about the like dealing with anxiety and stuff like that, then has it changed for any of us how you deal with it when you're younger to when as you've gotten older and you've experienced more, and then with that, what do we think is causing anxiety? I ain't looked at the stats, but I'll be gobsmacked if I'm not true when I say that anxiety increasing today versus in the past.
That's a good question.
So With regards to why anxiety is increasing, in my opinion, immediate reaction is because there's more social pressure forced through social media. And with regards to how it's changed, I definitely picked up the example Jay explained was a really good one, because I agree with that. The idea of that my brain is non-stop thinking about X, Y, and Z. So let me just address X, Y, and Z, because then afterwards, after a couple hours of dealing with it, addressing it, I feel way more chilled out about it, and I'm not just because of the baby situations, for example, where I'm watching something, my brain is not on it at all. I'm just considering about X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, all right, let me just focus on it. Don't waste time doing this. Then in a certain amount of period afterwards, I feel way better. That is definitely something I picked up rather recently in the last couple of years. Not during Herschel, I don't think. Yeah, that's what I would say. Probably that's the immediate thing that I think about how I interpret it differently.
I hear that.
Preparation, basically.
I think for me, I definitely do handle situations a lot better than I used to. Like you lot know what kind of person I was, or what the things I used to get up to help myself. So in that sense, like I feel like I've it's to be honest, it's more of a recent thing rather than yeah, it's been more of a recent thing, maybe within the last 2-3 years. And it's actually helped me in the sense that I've been more open to letting myself feel things. Like before, it was more like ignore and get on with it, or move on, like forget it, push to the back of your mind and get on with life. But now it's more like embrace it, feel it, let things wash over you, and then move on. So then at least it's like you're internalizing what you're going through, you're understanding, and yeah, you're getting on with life. I feel like yeah, yeah. Now I'm a lot more open to what my mind thinks in that sense, and I do agree with Massam in the sense like it's definitely social media plays a big part. Um, and yeah, the world's just sadder nowadays, man. Like we've said this before in the pod, like the world's just so much more. Everyone's just sad, man.
You know
It's
what?
peak.
See,
You
is
know
it?
what else it is though? It's also the fact that there's so much more awareness of it.
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah.
People now know that they have XYZ,
True,
right?
that's true.
Rather
Yeah.
than just having it misdiagnosed as, oh, you're a bit whatever, or you have
Ignorance is
some other
bliss.
problem. Yeah,
Mm,
exactly. So
that's true.
the fact that there is so much more awareness, it's so much easier to identify you are showing these symptoms and these traits. You
Mm.
feel a certain way. Hey, maybe that's anxiety. Maybe you can do XYZ to try and fix it. Whereas back in the day, it was like, nah, shut up.
Hmm. It didn't exist. There was no mental health back in the day. It was if you can walk, you're calm.
Let's get on with it.
Yeah,
Back in the
Which,
day, if you had mental health issues,
a psycho.
they would need to go to psych ward, right?
Yeah.
yeah, depending on what type and how extreme, yeah. But I think, yeah, you're both right in that sense. Where it was just get on with it. Just like you don't have time to feel sad when you're keeping yourself busy,
Mm-hmm.
which I think to some degree depends on why, etc., etc. But like generally speaking, but I think there's a lot of truth to that as well. I think
There is,
being
yeah.
healthy, eating vitamins, saying your prayers, shout out Hulk Hogan, right? Like genuinely though, like good health, good eating, right? No bad habits in that sense, working out, exercising, and then keeping yourself busy with a purpose in life. I think not having a purpose in life, whatever it is, will lead
Mm.
you down a rabbit hole of a plethora of mental health issues. Whatever your purpose is, be anything, can literally be anything, as long as it's like an actual good thing and not trying to like destroy someone or a country or something like that. But even then, those people are probably happy because they have a purpose in their life, right? That's an evil episode question, though, so we'll maybe come back to that future down the line. But it's just that sense of like, have a purpose in life, do something of value to you, and then you'll be driven. You'll be driven to that. Like do what you love, do what you enjoy. Otherwise, you're gonna be miserable in it. So,
Mm.
I feel like those like good health, good habits, good sleep. Sleep is so important for everything. It's the crux of everything. I've started a new job. I've started gym. My sleep
Let's
schedule's
go.
way better now. So like I just feel I got so much more energy now. Do you know what I mean? To like do more things, work on the podcast more, my actual job more, so on and so forth. Actually have energy to gym, come back, and then still carry on working because I've sorted my sleep out. So I think in this age, of overworking, working crazy hours, all that to be just probably always been there really. But like just doing that, working in the city for that type of person is just to not fall down the rabbit hole when you're living that life. You're probably blessed for that not to occur to you, but it's more common than it probably will. And then you'll look for things like drugs or bad habits to get you out of it. And yeah, I think those things are important and to get looked over.
100%. 100%. Jay, what do you say? What do you say to how you're dealing with life now in terms of anxiety, anything, mental health?
I wouldn't necessarily say I approach it differently. I'm just much more aware of when I have it, and so I can act on it a lot sooner.
Hmm.
I'm just more, I guess, mature in the sense of I understand my body and emotions a lot better. Whereas when you're younger, you just don't really like. Personally, I would just push it to the side and be like, "Well, I don't really want to think about that." Whereas now, I'm like, "Okay, I'm feeling a certain way. I don't want to feel this way.
Mm-hmm.
So let me try and sort that out, or make some headway into fixing that problem."
No one tells you shit when you're younger, man. No one tells you how to deal with these kind of things, bro.
Not in a South Asian household.
Hell, I'm not.
But I think
Harshu
there's a
grandma.
benefits to that. I think there's benefits to that as well. Like the whole ignorance is bliss. I feel like because of how much awareness has been pushed in, let's say, the last 20 years, I feel like there is a negative to that as well, where people are over diagnosing. People are over, do you know what I mean? They're going too far on that extreme when before it might have been too far on that extreme. It's all about that healthy middle ground. And I feel like, yeah, like people, yeah, I don't know. I just feel like people might over-diagnose them, so like make it worse than it actually is, especially in social media, where you're trying to get attention, and I think that comes into like a factor as well for a lot of people, especially if you're already in the public eye, right? I think, I think it to some degree at some point it went from one extreme to another, and if you can just find in the middle, like anything in life, you can be far better off. You gotta, yeah, like Jay said, I think face it, but don't overdo it in a way.
Do you think nowadays there is a lot of placebo effect where you, let's say, you think you're feeling a certain way because of today's episodes, let's say anxiety, you're feeling anxious, you go on social media, you get confirmation bias of your feelings being a certain thing, even though they may be a lot less on that side of the spectrum, let's say, and then you make yourself believe you're feeling that way, so then you actually feel that way.
Yeah,
100%.
100%.
If you surround yourself with depressed people, you're probably going to get depressed. If you surround yourself with happy people, you're probably going to be more inclined to be happy. So I think it's the same because people live on social media, man. Everyone with patty screen times right now. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Nobody wants to see that.
no, but like,
Nobody wants to see that.
you're essentially living it. You're living a second
16
life.
hours a day.
Yes, exactly. You're living a second life on your phone. So if your explore feed is a bunch of depressed people, you're gonna most likely be depressed. So I think bang on
Also,
with what you said. Yeah.
yeah, and also humans tend to have this innate ability to find patterns out of nothing, right? And you can think of the example that people like to change the narrative to fit them. That's a constant recurring theme. People often find themselves amongst something that they're not associated with, regardless, in all forms of life, is the reality. So, yeah, like if you tell somebody, if they see something, eventually they will conform that way, right? There's talking about psychologists and psychology theory. There's the example, right? The prison theory. Is it the prison theory where they have the
Yeah.
guards and stuff,
Yeah.
right? But humans just like to put themselves in a box. And if you tell them what the box is, they will put themselves in the box. That's the reality.
Yeah, what was the name of that experiment? I always forget the name.
Is it Milgram's? Oh no, that's the shock one.
Yeah, you're talking about the prison one where some people had to be guards, some people had to be
Yeah.
inmates, and
Yeah,
then they
yeah.
started acting like guards and inmates, right?
Yeah, yeah,
What's
yeah.
that
And
shit
they
called,
started
man?
abusing the inmates, despite none of them were actual guards.
Stanford prison experiment.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
the
I
one.
think so.
That's the
Yeah,
one.
I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that's it.
Yeah. I was looking at it here. Blah blah blah. $15 a day. Do that for inflation. They want a psychological study of prison life. They're randomly assigned to being prisoners or prison guards. the volunteers are selected to be guards were given like uniforms and had to like act as
Yeah.
them and prevent them from escaping. Over the following days, psychological abuse of the prisoners by the guards became brutal. These students went on the mad
Conformity.
when they abused their power
Mm.
Yeah.
and stuff like that. It's crazy. So it shows you how much strength you have to be prison guard in that sense. But like speaking about like what we just talked about, like how our anxiety is like dealing right now, we did a little GAD-7 test. It's called a general anxiety disorder questionnaire,
Yeah.
which is used by like medical professionals to sort of just like generalized diagnosis, first touch point sort of thing for people who are coming in with symptoms and whatnot. It's 7 questions, and there's a scale of not at all, several days, more than half the days, nearly every day. And they ask you questions like: you feeling nervous, anxious, on edge, unable to stop worrying too much about different things, having trouble relaxing, being restless, becoming easily annoyed, and feeling afraid as if something awful might happen. And depending on the criteria that you answered with, you get a score out of 21, the higher being higher on the spectrum of having this generalized anxiety disorder, which is one of the most common ones, I think. So what was everyone's results? It's over the last 2 weeks. I think that's what they asked you to do.
Yeah.
Mine was 0.
Seriously.
Jeez.
Fuck you
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. And I answered it genuinely.
Mine was 8. I have
Same.
it said
Bingo.
mild. Yeah.
Yeah, mine was 8 as well. By the way, you didn't mention 5, 10, 15 correlate to mild, moderate, and severe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
0, 1, 2, 3 is not what
0,
was
1,
it?
2, 3 is basically the equivalent of like not at all, several days, more than half the days,
Yeah.
nearly every day.
Oh, 5, 10, 15 are okay, mild and,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
moderate, and then severe is 15 or above, right? Cool,
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
And 21. Yeah.
I got 7, so similar.
Okay.
It's
Interesting.
kind of interesting looking at this questionnaire though, because I don't know if you guys felt the same, but there for me it's trying to average over 2 weeks, right? So there might be
Mhm.
days where I'm a 20 theoretically, and then other days where I'm 0, right?
Mhm.
So over time, sure, it's mild, but there might be certain days where it's so hyper fixated on you feeling a bunch of shit
Yeah.
that maybe you are crippled, right?
Mhm.
But it's just not over a long period of time. So
Yeah.
you don't really get that from this questionnaire.
I had a funny that we've actually just talked about this, but I had as part of the I was telling Massam last night as part of the test from on Friday for the full body MOT or whatnot. They did a fight or flight slash your resting system test on me to basically see how my stress function is in my body and stuff. So it's a lot more fucking better than a fucking 7 questions on a paper and asking you what how you are. But basically it was really cool. They put like this clip on my ear and then the guy goes to me, I'm gonna leave the room now for 2 minutes and just exist. Just stay in the room and just exist. And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, don't read nothing, don't look at anything, don't don't go on your phone, just stay in the room, breathe in, breathe out, just exist, let your thoughts wander to wherever they need to go, right? I said calm, say no more. Guy leaves, yeah, comes back 2 minutes later. I'm thinking calm, like, oh, this is chilling. I have like I'm about to go out afterwards, I'm thinking about the motive, I'm having fun in my head. Yeah, comes back and he's like, let's look at the results, right? He goes, there's 3 bars on the screen. It's red, blue, and green. And he's like, we need to look at the green bar first. And he was like, this bar is out of 100%. And a person who, so basically measures your, it extrapolates the data for the past 2 weeks, similar to this, right? And he goes, a person of your age and, just a person who is with
Demographic.
a healthy mindset, yeah, and also my demographic, the percentage should be within 60 to 75%, or anything above that, like 75%, something like that, right? In the green. I was 26%, bro.
Oh no. Is everything all right at home, brother?
I don't know, geezer. I thought it was
You
fine.
enjoyed yourself.
I was chilling in my head.
Subconsciously, though.
Trust me,
Subconsciously.
it's the demons inside, fam.
Yeah, brother.
He was like, you need to like, what is like, have you? He was like, in the part, this extrapolates for the last 2 weeks, right? I was like, cool, and I was like, how does it work though? In a sense, like, what does it measure? And he was like, it just measures your heart rate and like he showed me like a chart, and he showed me like peaks and troughs, and he was like, this is when your mental activity was more, and he said some other shit, right? I'm getting a report in a couple of days, so I'll send it to you guys as well.
Cool.
But he was like, you need to you need to chill out. He was like, you need to calm down. And I was like, shit, like, what have I done? But yeah, it's mad. It's crazy.
That's pretty cool. I want to do this, bro. I need
Yeah,
to
man.
see if I need to see my lot for this.
So did each bar represent a certain thing?
Yeah, so then after the green one, he showed me the red and blue one. So the red one was your fight or flight reaction, your function, and then the blue one was like a digestive resting reaction or something like that. So I think it's what mediates your heart rate to come back down. And then fight or flight is basically any sort of increase in your heart rate. And yeah, they were both pretty high but even, I think. I'll find the image and I'll send it to you guys when I get sent it. But yeah, he was just like, you essentially, in my head, it's funny that I said earlier, I was like, I think I'm thinking I'm dealing better with stress in life, but maybe it's like I think I am, and I am calming myself down, but naturally I do overthink a lot. So I guess I don't know, I guess I need to work on it more. But yeah, it's just interesting to see how people get tested on it. Like I've learned something new about myself within a couple of hours, so it's quite funny.
That's interesting.
Sounds like a very helpful thing.
Mm,
If people have access to it, definitely do it.
100%, yeah. Get the help you need.
I wondered to what degree it's accurate as well.
Yeah.
Like there's peer reviews, studies on that sort of stuff. I have no idea.
Mm.
I'm sure it is to a certain degree.
There's no way his advice was just chill out.
No. He obviously said more. He was like, because he
Take a
did
chill pill.
take a chill. Yeah, take 2 Xanax and you'll be fine, brother. He was like, he looked at my whole health and he was like, okay, you're surprisingly, I'm fine.
Wow.
Surprisingly, I'm actually okay. Like he was like, your liver function, your heart function, everything's calm. And I was like, are you sure? You
Your
might need to retest that shit, mate. I was
Regenerative.
like, that's exactly what my son said. So fastest regenerative organ, fam. But yeah, surprisingly, you said it was fine. So, but he was like, you need to cut down on like, unhealthy snacking. He was like, exercise a bit more because I've been a fat shit recently, bro. I'll be real. I don't do shit no more.
Two peppers.
Two pepes, bro. Take
I go to your local gym, so hurry up, mate.
Sticky one there. Sticky one. Why
Your
do you
girl
do
goes
these
to the
things?
same gym. Just get a jog over there.
She's gonna show me up, bro.
Oh, good.
Nah, but I actually had one more question for you guys with regards to, and we can round it off there. But with regards to like, I wanted to base it more on us four, in particular, being 4 brown males, part of the South Asian community. Um, we kind of touched on it earlier, but I wanted to delve a little deeper on it too. We said anxiety doesn't really exist in our communities. It's there's increased awareness for it now. There's more people. There's conversations happening in and around the communities a bit more now. But how do you? Is this something that you guys feel that you can talk about within your home, your family, or something, or um, is it something that you feel like should be spoken about more within our communities, within our homes, within our families? And also not only from an Asian perspective, but also from, because I'm sure it's not just Asians. I'm sure it's a lot more. I'm sure like BAME. I don't know. It could be everyone. I don't know, but I know especially in Asian communities, it's tough. But also aside from that, being males and toxic masculinity, we talked about it in the past in the men's mental health episode. Go check that out, please. Need some views. But yeah, would you guys think on that front? Is that something that we can talk about more within the mandem, within our homes?
I think at the very least, acknowledge it. I think that's a good first step because I think that's the problem. Ignorance is bliss until it isn't blissful, and I think a lot of lying to ourselves or themselves about the stuff they go through, and it just seeps down and it makes it worse for your kids and your kids' kids and the environment you grow up in and you're raised. And I think a lot of running away from it, because those older generations grew up in a time where they grew up in villages, if you're talking about us in South Asian communities, either your parents or most likely your grandparents, but definitely your great grandparents. I'd be surprised. There's probably very few out there who don't follow that pattern of them being born in a village somewhere back home, where they don't have much. They don't have anything really, and they didn't have a choice but to just get on with it, which means you don't have the time for all these feelings because you've got to put food on the table. But that's just the way they grew up, and there is a lot of lessons and a lot of good things I think society could take from that. But then there's also a lot of negative things as well that you can also take from that. And I think acknowledging it, but not going overboard with it, and just knowing that if you can do those like base things, those fundamental things, like be in good health, have a routine, have a structure, eat good, have a purpose in life, be busy, and if you can do all of those things and you still find yourself suffering, then it's like, okay, do you know what I mean? Then like make sure you're doing the fundamentals good first, like you're looking after yourself first, and then if you're still having problems, then it's like, okay, let's find a different route. But I think you can go through, this is just my personal belief, I think you can go through all the therapy you want, I think you can go through all the clinical diagnosis and drugs and medication you want, but if at the end of the day you're not looking after yourself, I think in the ways that I just mentioned, I don't think those things will really, I don't think they'll solve your problems. They might help, but it's kind of like fighting a losing battle. I think those other things are very important, and I think people will disregard it.
That's fair. That's fair. Cool. I do have something to say on that, but I'll wait until the end.
Yeah, I was gonna say as well. I was gonna say something on that as well, to be honest.
We didn't even talk about people who have like things like PTSD and people like soldiers from the war, people who are clinically like insane, right? Who have these like serious issues. We're not talking about those people. We're talking about just your general everyday Joe blogs, because those people like who have PTSD, soldiers, sons, so they that's just different. That's just different. That's you can't like, that's just meant your brain's changed, like it's just changed because of like severe trauma, severe issues that you've been through. So that's just a whole different ball game. That's just everything I said is even practically irrelevant when you talk about those type of people, because that's just hardcore, man. That's just hardcore. Just worth noting that.
Fair. No, that's fair. Jay, do you want to go next? Because I see Muscle's muted, rubbing his lips.
Yeah. Let me focus on the point that you asked around South Asian households. There's two like ways to look at this, because I'd say, and I've probably said this in the past as well, there's like two different differentiating factors. One is if your family is still quite rooted to old Indian tradition. Families where they
Asian.
don't have what?
So I just said Asian tradition.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Asian. I mean, I'm Indian, so I'm taking that point. But yeah, South Asian tradition. Yeah, maybe they don't have a lot of, let's say, experience in the Western world, growing up in these sort of countries where it is more open by nature. So as Hamza mentioned, like older generations, it wasn't part of their lifestyle. They probably grew up with their parents saying, get on with it. So because it's not part of their life, they don't see it with the same impetus as we do. So they don't impart that type of knowledge onto us. And then we grow up sort of thinking and feeling the same ways. And then there's the other side where maybe you do have more of a progressive family. Maybe they've either grown up also in Western world and been through the same institutions that we have. Maybe they went to like UK university and stuff as an example. So they understand and more open to thinking about things in a more open way. And so it's easier to have those conversations in that type of environment. It's almost certainly true in every situation where you can talk more about it and it should be spoken about more. South Asian culture is really bad in that sense. I mean, if just between us four, how many of us really spoke about our feelings and mental health growing up with our families? Probably very little at all between us. So there's a lot more that we can do in general. It goes back to like the short film that I was doing, which was rooted around South Asian mental health, and the whole premise of that was bringing more discussion to that type of point, and getting sort of out of your own head and trying to get help where needed, and being more open as a culture in general. So definitely we can do more and to have those open conversations. Um, if there's anything I'd say you like one someone could do, if you're in an environment where maybe your parents or the older generation don't have those types of conversations with you, um, is probably not to just walk away from it and don't have that at all. Try and educate your own parents on how you're feeling, and you can teach them more emotional empathy and maturity, and explain why the way that you're feeling is okay to feel that way. It is actually something that is true, and isn't just something that they should pass under the rug. So that's sort of what I would say. But yeah, that's from
Hey,
my own experience anyway.
I hear you. No, 100%. I hear that. Masam, you got anything to say on it?
Yeah, I think I come from a slightly different household. I feel like I'm that outlier that you're referring to. I feel like the always the first step is, I mean, there's a couple actually. One is always good to rip the band-aid off, and you're the one who has to kind of instigate the conversation, because the reality is most people come only in the last 20 years people become hypersensitive to this situation. For the last prior long time, unless you had like the real philosophers like Aurelius, who obviously was considering it back in like 100 BC, but like it's really rare for the most, like only recently. I think it's fair to say, right, 10 years, if that, honestly, that this has become a mainstay conversation. So like I feel like there needs to be some kind of acceptance from the individual also, that their parents, they're ignorant to it, they're ignorant to the conversation, but it doesn't necessarily come from a bad place. It's just
Mm.
because they weren't taught the same way you're now more aware. So I feel like there's also has to be, it's a weird one, because I don't necessarily think that it's not necessarily fair this should be the situation, but like in those circumstances, it's a lot more you have to be doing the job, right? You have to approach the conversation, bring up the ideals, and then maybe eventually they will learn and progress from
Mm-hmm.
there. But there's a lot of your activity involved, I would say, which isn't fair, 100%, but it's like part and parcel of the trade, right? So
Mm-hmm.
maybe you'll have those lessons to then break this kind of cycle, and be more accepting, be more understanding, and going from there.
What was what was your experience? You're saying you maybe felt like you're an outlier in this situation. So like,
Yeah,
yeah.
me personally, I don't really have a problem. Come from a different household, right? I quite often bring up if I'm worried about something, if I'm concerned about something. I don't necessarily see there as a barrier there, but I understand my situation might not necessarily be the same as everybody else's. So to me, there's never been a sort of like problem approaching a subject, to be
Mm.
honest with you, with regards to mental health. Personally, I'm pretty gifted like
Respect that.
that.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think with regards to me, I think it was something like that. And my parents, you're probably watching this, so write in the comments below, Dad, Mom. But I think it was definitely something that it wasn't understood in the household at one point, because as we've all said, um, it's just the way people are raised, and it's just not in their status quo. But as Masam said, it has to be, someone has to have that conversation within the family for it to be normal, and especially as an older sibling, it's also something that is beneficial for the next kid. Um, so in that sense, yeah, like I do believe it's something that can be spoken about more in Asian households. I also do agree with Hamza in the sense that it's to an extent, like, don't be a dickhead. If you think you've got a problem, really sit and evaluate yourself. Like, really, don't, like I'm saying, like, do the basics as Hamza said, but also, like, if don't do the whole social media thing. I feel like there's a difference between, I feel like with us four, is we're privileged in a way where it's like we might have had bouts or moments of anxiety, but it's not a debilitating factor in our lives where it's like it's taken over everything and we can't move. There's people with real trauma and people with this kind of stuff stops them their everyday lives and stuff. So if you're in a position like that, definitely go get help. Definitely do what you need to do the therapy, do whatever you need to do. There's sources out there, and I won't forget to link some in our story this time around. But yeah, like
I got a
there's a
link tree ready
difference.
to go
And
with a bunch of different mental health
yeah,
organizations and stuff. So we'll pop that up.
perfect. I mean, yeah, I just mean, like, it's something that can definitely be spoken about more. But just be mindful. Be mindful that people really go through things, and it's not something they should just throw around. But yeah.
So, social media to mental health is the Google search to physical health. You know when
Mm.
you got like cold and you Google search and it's like, oh, you got stage 4 lung cancer. It's like, no, I don't, bro.
I got bronchitis.
That's a
It's fine. It's
that's a
fine.
great analogy. That is a great analogy, bro.
That's funny.
Oh, I'm jittery today. Oh, you got fucking schizophrenia, bro.
It's not good. It's not good. Well, I have
It's mad.
I have one more quote that I was saving. If we'd want to end it on this one, if there's no other
Let's
sort
do
of
it.
topics that we want to cover, it's again from the big boy, big Marcus Aurelius. It says, the first step, don't be anxious. Nature controls it all. And before long, you'll be no one, nowhere, like Hadrian and Augustus, who were Roman emperors. The second step, concentrate on what you have to do. Fix your eyes on it. Remind yourself that your task is to be a good human being. Remind yourself what nature demands of people. Then do it without hesitation and speak the truth as you see it, but with kindness, with humility, without hypocrisy. So I thought it kind of encompasses everything we kind of talked about today.
And on that note, thank you for listening to Atypical. That was beautiful, Hamza. Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
bro. I tried.
Let us let us know what you think in the
Thank
comments down below.
Aurelius, bro. I wasn't doing
Thank
nothing, bro.
thank you, Aurelius. My guy Marcus. Big Marky.
How close
Marky
was
Mark.
Massam to the 100 BC estimation? When was he
I
around?
don't think it was far off, to be fair. Let me
This
see.
guy's been,
Oh, yeah.
been around
Oh,
the block too
well,
much.
actually, it was 80, 180. That's what my son meant, not 100 BC.
200 years.
Oh,
Yeah, that's what I meant. It's
But
Roman
in
Empire.
the grand scheme of
It's
life,
close enough.
it's pretty close.
Yeah. 200 years, nothing.
But yes, like and subscribe. Let us know if you want to see something like this again. And yeah, Hamza did say there's other forms of PTSD, anxiety, like PTSD, so on and so forth. We don't know anything about it, but we would be glad to talk about it and find out more information and educate ourselves. And yeah, please let us know what you think. Like, subscribe. It helps us more than you know. And thank you for listening.